All right, so let us start. We have the sixth chapter and the last chapter of the book today that will be presented by Vamsi Krishna ji. So over to you, Vamsi ji. We can start.
Okay, thank you, ji. I will let me start with an invocation. Ma bhrata bhrataran dvikshan ma swasa ramutasvasa samyancha sarvata bhutva vacham vajat vadatu bhadraya. This is a mantra from Atharva Veda. It says, may not brothers dislike brothers, may not sisters dislike each other. Let all of them become of one mind in their auspicious activities and speak auspicious words to one another. Resonating with this mantra, in September last year, a group of people under the able guidance of LSG and Rajiv ji came together and they started learning about negationism. In December the same year, depending on the topics that they have chosen, they presented their work that they have done under the able guidance of LSG. It was just the beginning. The same group continued, and today it has taken the form of Voice of India Academy. It started off its work with the big book review of Sitaram Goyalji from the publication house Voice of India. This is the last chapter of the book. Move the screen. Okay, is my screen visible now? The second screen?
Yes, yes. I mean, Muslim separatism, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is not the end, and it is just the beginning for Voice of India Academy. Goyalji's book actually is based on another book by another stalwart, Ram Gopal Mishra ji, the Indian resistance to early Muslim invaders. If you see, the person who, as per the norms of a regular program, the person who speaks at the last, ideally his job is supposed to be a very easy one. How does it normally end? He says vote of thanks. He thanks the people who contributed earlier. He summarizes what they told, and then between round in the midst of a big round of applause, he comfortably goes and takes his seat. But unfortunately, Sitaram Goyalji's book is not created in such a way. Even the sixth chapter, the first four, if you look at a glance at the book that Sitaram Goyalji has written, the chapters, National Perspective on Indian History, starting from there to the last chapter, the nature of national frontiers. The last two chapters are what Sitaram Goyalji writes as a call for action. The tempo that he builds up in the preceding chapters, which are the fourth chapters, he builds the foundation, and in the fifth and sixth chapters, he actually gives a call for the nation. I stick to the headings that he has already put in his book, and my presentation will go not as a parroting what he has written, but what my reflection about what he has written. I take little bit freedom to include the research that I have done during my exercise or my study about negationism under the able guidance of LSG, the things which I have already mentioned. Moving on to the next slide, the sixth chapter. These are the headings which are there. You can also notice the picture which is there on the left side of the PPT. Today I stumbled upon during my search the Kannada translation of the book that Sitaram ji has written. By the way, did I mention that Voice of India is also looking at the work of translating Voice of India books into different Indian languages? Let us get into the first part, Pakistan, the spearhead of Islamic bloc.
Vamsiji, you may make that presentation full screen.
I did that, but I'm not able to then move to the other part.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Now I'm able to do. Yeah. Very few people who understand the real essence of Pakistan will not associate only the physical frontiers. Kashmir definitely an issue which is slowly getting solved in its entirety. And whenever we think of Pakistan, the only agenda or the only aspect that comes in a very big fashion is the issue of Kashmir, that Pakistan wants to occupy and make Kashmir as part of its territory. But the point to be understood is that Pakistan as such is a country which economically is not as powerful as Bharat, and also military in the military front also it faced repercussions when it went ahead with its warmongering nature with Bharat. Even despite of all these things, if we observe, Pakistan still is at a position wherein it always wants to have a fight with India. The thing is that it wants to expand its physical frontier on one end, but in a subtle manner, there is an ideological frontier that it kept on pushing since its formation. I would like to touch upon my reflections, which is not in the book, but not as a book review, but the ideological frontier of versus physical frontier and internal enemies of nation, wherein I want to bring some aspects of the negationism research topic, which is the negationism, the concept of Rajakars and Nizam rule in Hyderabad, which is in complete agreement. So what I'm trying to explain here, or what I'm trying to tell here is, when I am going through the chapter 6 of Sitaram Goyalji's book, and especially when I stumbled upon these sort of ideas wherein it's an ideological frontier that Pakistan is trying to push, and it's not a physical frontier in the real essence. And also when I read the topic or the lines in the book which talk about internal enemies of nation, I can very clearly associate the understanding that I got or the incidents that I have gone through or read through with regards to Rajakar movement in the erstwhile Nizam state. The ideological frontier which Pakistan is pushing is not its own. It's the idea of Islamic State. Until 60s, Pakistan was morally being supported by all the Islamic nations, both on the either side, on the either side of Bharat. At that point of time, the Middle East was not very strong. The oil wells were not were not discovered, and they were not giving money to the Islamic countries, especially the Middle East. By the way, when Muhammad Ghaznavi and all those people, when they used to attack India and they used to return to their places with the loot and also with the slaves, despite the differences, all the Islamic nations used to regard Muhammad Ghaznavi and Gauri as their leaders, and that they are doing the sacred job of Islam. Compare, as an analogy, the same thing is happening now with the idea that Pakistan is trying to push. It is trying to enact itself as the engine or the spearhead of the so-called Islamic bloc, which was existing now on the both sides of India. That's why we see Pakistan maintains good relationship with Malaysia, and then it also maintains good relationship with Turkey and many other countries. And whenever Pakistan goes for a war, and whenever it makes an attempt to do something with respect to Kashmir or raise an issue, there is certain amount of support that normally percolates from the Middle East. This is what is the ideological frontier that Pakistan is trying to push. The physical frontier is very obvious, which is the terrorism that it is trying to put forth in the region of Kashmir, and the things that we are actually seeing. The third point, which Sitaram Goyalji mentions in a very big fashion with respect to internal enemies of nation. Here is what I want to bring the aspect of my study related to Rajakars and the Nizam state. The people who came from outside and who started ruling Bharat by attacking it used to think that it is their birthright given by their forefathers by wielding the sword, by wielding the saber and then conquering the land, and they are at the free will of using this land as and how however they want to do. Let me bring the examples that happened during the Khilafat movement. When the Khalifa of Turkey fell down, it is in India that people, especially the Muslims, they were so empathetic, and they were against the downfall of Khilafat movement, downfall of Khalifa in Turkey. Shaukat Ali, at that point of time, who was the prime minister, who was at that point of time in the Nizam's government, did whatever he can to ensure that a 300-pound pension was given to the Caliph who was dethroned by the British Empire and who was staying at that point of time in France. I did a rough calculation by Googling and trying to find out a few numbers, and with respect to the calculation that I have done, considering the inflation rate of the pounds of a UK pound at that point of time, the 300 pounds at today's cost would be around 21,000 pounds per month at a rate of 4.38 inflation. Not only that, the Khalifa was paid this pension by Nizam from his treasury, and I will let you know where the treasury is actually getting money from. Shaukat Ali also ensured that all the family members of Caliph also gets some amount of money, which is not accounted for. After Khilafat movement, and when Shaukat Ali saw that, after 7 years of that, the princess of so-called the Turkey king, or the Khalifa, who is no more Khalifa, wants to get his both daughters or his only daughter married. At that point of time, it is again Shaukat Ali who wrote a letter to Turkey Caliph saying that the first son of Nizam would be an ideal bridegroom for the princess. At that point of time, they have a tradition wherein the bride was given something called as meher, MEHR, and that amounted to a money of 5,000 British pounds. Nizam himself, who at that point of time was the richest man in the world, he thought that is way too much money. So Shaukat Ali again made the Khalifa, the so-called Khalifa, who was at that point of time not a Khalifa, Caliph. He ensured that his brother's daughter would be given to as wife to the second son of Nizam. So what I am trying to bring forth here is the internal enemies of nation in such a disguise is not something that we see now with so much of information at least at our disposal, and the news is being the news is available to many of us in a short span of time. The internal enemies of nation actually were there even before our independence. And this gentleman Shaukat Ali later, when the Nizam rule ended and Hyderabad became part of Indian Union, he went to Pakistan and he became the Prime Minister of Pakistan. In the books, in the books that were written at that point of time by the mediator of Indian government and Nizam government, the period between 1947 and 1948. The mediator, when he had when he had discussions with Shaukat Ali, he claims that Shaukat Ali was a core Islamist and who is hell bent in making Hyderabad state an Islamic state. And by the way, that's what the dream that even Nizam had at that point of time. We can imagine there will not be no enemy of a nation than a person who thinks that he wants to use the resources of particular physical boundaries. So when I say Hyderabad or the state of Hyderabad, the natural resources, everything belongs and they form the internal boundaries of so-called Bharat. But then he wants to claim himself as an Islamic state and part of Pakistan. And Pakistan is way beyond the boundaries of Hyderabad state. So no, I mean, it's the heights of somebody being an enemy to his own motherland. That he uses the own the resources of his country, but he will be loyal to some other country. And when this 5,000 pound meher was given, that in today's amount, that was around that would be around 3 crore 59 lakh rupees. And where is that Nizam getting all the money from? He is getting money from the peasants, the farmers, the hard-working people. Majority of the people who are Hindus at that point of time, 83% of people in Hyderabad state were Hindus, and they were all working in either Nizam's government, as a Nizam government established factories or whatever, or doing their activity of farming or anything. And they are the ones who are generating that income. So this is what is the money that Nizam at his disposal, just like that he gave as a pension to somebody whose forefathers were all those who came and started ruling here. So this is what I'm trying to say. The internal enemies of nation are very well created, are very well present even before we get independent. Let me now go to the second aspect, what Goyalji mentions in his book, the character of our state. The Rajputs of medieval India, they were not only protecting the physical frontiers of our nation, they were also upholding the traditions and the Sanatan Dharma values of our nation. They know that once the physical frontiers are compromised, it is that the enemy who doesn't care about the values of the values of India will come, and whole of the Sanatan Dharma will go for a toss. That is why Rajputs have put a strong fight, not only in terms of protecting their physical frontiers when they were having the fights, even after the establishment of Mughal rule, they were in continuous fights with Mughal kings and everyone. Apart from their physical frontiers, it is their protection or their idea of protecting the Sanatan Dharma values of this nation. But the book also mentioned that we have seen that the 570 years of war, finally India has to give up, the physical frontier has to give up, and people from Middle East were able to conquer us. At that point of time, Rajputs were not having that forward movement, or what was understood in the previous chapter, that they were only having an ad hoc army, but the people who were attacking were having army which was always in a ready mode. The second aspect is that today we have a central state, but it is devoid of Hindu consciousness. What I am trying to say is, even though at that point of time we were not having a central state, and that is why we were not able to consolidate our army against an enemy. And now we have a central state wherein we have the luxury of consolidation of an army that can happen in a few hours, which is what we have seen, that whenever a country has war, all the states and all the parts of country react in a single fashion, and they contribute towards the objective of defeating the enemy. That's what the central state agenda actually comes into picture, and it can facilitate that aspect, which was not there during the medieval times, because the independent kingdoms were fighting with one another, and there was no central state which was like a Gupta empire or a Mauryan empire, which was there even before them. At this point of time, I also would like to reflect upon my understanding with some of the with the content of Ramayana written by Valmiki. Today, when I was reading the Ayodhya Kanda, in the 9th Sarga and 10th Sarga, before 9th Sarga, in 8th Sarga and 7th Sarga, when Rama, when he's already into exile, Bharata comes and Rama tells him that he cannot go back to the kingdom, and he can rule Ayodhya. And Bharata just collects his padukas, and he goes back to Ayodhya. Then Rama starts his journey, and when he enters the Dandakaranya, all the rishis and sages come to him and they request him to defend them and protect them against Rakshasas. Rama, at that point of time, even though he is not a crowned king, he was still the so-called prince, and he understands that the idea of a central state and the king ruling that state will think that all the people in his kingdom are his children, and protecting them is his duty. That is when he promises to all the sages and rishis in Dandakaranya that he would be protecting them. In 9th Sarga, when Sita says that because you have given this promise and you have this sword and the bow in your arrow, you cannot kill Rakshasas just like that, because they actually did not harm you. That is when Rama actually establishes the idea of ahimsa, not ahimsa, but himsa, and why it is needed, and what is the Kshatriya Dharma and what is the Raja Dharma. What I can correlate with the idea that Sitaram Goyalji was talking about the central state is that power vesting at a single point, wherein that single point will act in a way that is in accordance with the Hindu consciousness. Rama says that, Sita, what you told is correct. Your upbringing has made you to tell all these things, which is true. But there is something which is beyond what you are saying, and which is what is protecting the Dharma and upholding the truth. The truth is that I have given word to the sages, and my word and my responsibility as a king is to protect the country. Unfortunately, the current central state is not having that type of ideology, and it is not having the Hindu consciousness, which is very much present in all the literature and all the aspects of our life. Our constitution, it brought in a lot of terminology and all those things from various other best constitutions at that point of time that they thought of, but they were not able to strike a chord, or they were not able to get to an agreement where the people, especially the Hindu masses, can feel that the constitution was really written in such a way that it is going to protect the character of this nation. Because the so-called secularism and socialism, when they crept into the constitution, the Sanatanic Hindu values, they got very much diluted. So our character of state at the current time is much worse than what was there during the medieval time, when Rajputs were trying to fight protecting not only the frontiers, the physical frontiers, but also they were actually trying to protect the ideological frontiers of our nation. Today's politics, in the manifesto, you tamper, you decorate them with all these ideas of secularism and socialism, and whenever the aspect of minorities come, it is always that appeasement aspect. On your stage, when you are giving a speech as a politician, you have by your side a Maulvi or a Muslim politician, then you are claimed to be more secular, and you can be rest assured that people will see you as a very progressive person. It is only that these type of manifestos are now in vogue. Also, the politics has come to a stage wherein we started doing soft pedaling towards our aggression. Pakistan has attacked us more than twice, and every time our soldiers were ever ready and we gave a befitting reply. There were times when we were able to drive them till to the center point of their nation, but then the politics and the politicians here gave a calling that the army has to come back. And then what is that we have done? The aggression was addressed with a couple of signs, and then giving back all the territory that we have conquered in a rightful war. A war, why I am saying a rightful war and why we have exclusive rights over the territory is because we did not go for a war. It is just that the other party has come for a war and we just won over them. So it's a very fair deal, and it's a war which was fought on dharma, that somebody is attacking you and you attack that person and you gain supremacy over him and you got his physical, you got control over his territory, then it is all obviously yours. But still the politics at that point of time were doing this soft pedaling wherein the whole conquered land was given to them. And what did they do? The signing and all those things gets over, and they go back to their country and they again start thinking of ways to again how to attack the country. And during the Bangladesh war, when our soldiers, when the so-called Pakistani soldiers were treating the people in Bangladesh, the East Pakistan, in a manner which is not supposed to be, in a manner which is not supposed to be dealt with, Indian government went to help, and when we liberated the so-called Bangladesh. And what is that? The written award, the written prize that we have given, there are a lot of conversion that is happening, a lot of conversion that has happened in Bangladesh, and more importantly, Bangladesh claiming itself as an Islamic state. So this is what is the soft pedaling towards aggression that we had. I clubbed the last 2 points, which is Hindu society should seize the state and pursuit of forward policies. When I was thinking deeply, like which is the picture that I have to put, I could not think more. I could not think anyone other than Shivaji Maharaj. And most importantly, the Hindu Samrajya Divas, which is so-called, which is celebrated, is only because on that day Shivaji Maharaj was claimed as Chhatrapati. A fact which was unknown until that time, that a Hindu person becoming a king was done on that day, and he became Chhatrapati. This is what is supposed to happen, that with Hindu society, that the Hindu society come forward, forget their divisions, and in a vehement and in a very strong fashion, they should seize the state and they should do whatever they can within their reach to establish the Hindu Rashtra. Here I am using the Hindu Rashtra not in a sense of not in a sense which is controversial, but a place with a well-defined physical boundaries, but which is adhering to the principles of Sanatana Dharma. And the pursuit of forward policies, what Goyalji says is that the so-called fifth column that one of the chapters mentioned, the Sufis and other people, when the invaders were coming and they were waging wars, we were also having trade with the Middle East. So people used to come from Middle East as the so-called, we see that Sufis and also traders, but they were doing the job of detectives here. And we very much understood from the previous chapters that they were sending the maps and the ways to approach and ways to attack the nation through those tough physical terrains. The fifth block now, which is being created, is the so-called Maulvis and other people who I earlier mentioned still think that they are coming from the true bloodline, like the Turkish bloodline or the Iranian bloodline, and it is that they have to actually protect it. And and the way to only protect is that they always have to talk about their supremacy and enact in such a way. The famous politician from Hyderabad, which we very much know from MIM, till today, the point which I want to highlight, that the marriage of his daughter till today, like the example that I have given with the two sons of the last Nizam, wherein he ensured that the two princes would get married into not somebody of Indian blood, but a Turkish blood. The same thing is still continuing today. The politicians of today, the famous politician, his daughter, he is given in 2017 into a Paiga family. And who are these Paigas? And the Paigas claim that their origins and everything is from Iran. So we can see that this idea of Islamic State, or the idea of being in the country but acting against it, is not very uncommon. And by the way, this ideology of maintaining the bloodline or trying to be different is not, I would not say it's not prevalent, but it's not very common across the masses. When I say masses, and the ordinary people are having a very light notion of their particular religion. The fact being that they are into their livelihood and they have to struggle day in and day out just to make their ends meet. But these Maulvis and other people who get funded from outside the nation a humongous amount of money, it is they who conspire against the nation. It is they who instigate people, the local people, to riot against the nation, the state. The fifth column that is being formed is exactly this fifth column, that the common people, the common person here who has nothing against the nation, is injected with this poison of Islamic State and all those other ideologies, and they become the fifth column to such an extent that they now not only are becoming spies against the nation, but they are reaching to a level wherein they also fight against the police force who come to actually stop that riot. This, in an essence, is what the sixth chapter is all about, where Goelji tries to give. In the fifth chapter, he gave the reasons, and in the sixth chapter, the call for the nation. In the last two parts of the sixth chapter, he gave the call for the nation, call for the people to read the book, the original book written by Ram Gopal Mishra ji. He very clearly mentions that Hindus should be given a strength, an idea of strength, a mental strength, that the Islamic imperialism or their supremacy can be countered. This is one of the strongest points that he made multiple amount of times in the sixth chapter, that we cannot think, or we cannot be in a state of submissive, but there is always a heroic resistance that was given to the invaders right from 636 AD to 1206 AD. And as I mentioned earlier, the end speech should end with vote of thanks, with with lot of happiness. I would like to say that we successfully completed the 6 chapters, and I believe, as I mentioned earlier, this journey will continue. With that note, I would like to thank people who gave me this opportunity, and hand over the virtual stage to Arnabji.
Thank you, Vamsiji. Fantastic presentation. So we are ready for some questions, discussions, etc. I mean, you are absolutely right in the sense that we right now we are, I mean, in a position where we have to assert our Hindu ideology, Hindu state more strongly. So the Bangladesh war has already been pointed out by you, I mean, by Sitaramji, is that we won so heavily, so convincingly, and we just gave away those 90,000 odd prisoners of war for nothing. I mean, we could have wrested, I mean, there are many people who would say that we could have wrested Kashmir back in lieu of that. We did not do. Not only that, we let Bangladesh become an Islamic state. And you know that Bangladesh actually is now causing more problems to India from this infiltrations and so many other things than actually Pakistan. We all know about Pakistan, but people in near the states in near the border in West Bengal will tell you the real situation in. So the Bangladesh was a very, very bad opportunity that we lost. So anyway, I mean, so there are yeah, maybe there are some questions, discussions from other people. So in the chat, Lakshmiji has pointed out an interesting fact. Lakshmiji, would you want to say something more about it? Lakshmi Prasadji?
Yeah, hi. So I was reading through the autobiography of the combined Andhra Pradesh state's first chief minister, who was also a very great Congress leader called Tanguturi Prakasam. He was a very tall leader. So he was present at the time of time when Balagangadhar Tilak passed away, and he was part of the procession when his dead body was being taken to the cremation ground in Mumbai. So in his book, he wrote that one of the people who shouldered the the stretcher on which the body is taken away was Maulana Shaukat Ali. That was around the time, probably just 6 months 6 months ago, Gandhi announced this Congress Khilafat movement, basically the pact, where Gandhi severely went against his own principles of. I mean, basically, he was favoring for a dictatorship in Turkey, whereas he was asking the British for a democracy in India. So basically, the whole idea was to appease the Muslims of India so that he can make them join the freedom struggle.
Right. Yeah, actually, when after this marriage of Nizam sons to the princess of Turkey Caliph, when they were actually, and Shaukat Ali, by the way, Shaukat Ali actually goes to the second roundtable conference along with Gandhi. So on the return journey, he understands that Gandhiji is having soft corner for Khalifa and Khilafat movement, and he actually arranges a meeting between the two princes and Gandhi. And it's an irony. Gandhi says that I am in third class and I cannot go to first class. And these people, the princes being in first class, they say that we cannot go to third class. And it is actually portrayed as if Gandhi is right in his own way and princes are right in his own way. And Shaukat Ali created a true sense, says that, okay, let us have a meeting in second class. So these are funny things coming in as news, portraying those people are very great people is very astonishing. And this thing is continuing till today. In 2017, I think 2017 or 2012, I'm not sure of the date, the dead body of the Caliph, the Turkish emperor, it was kept in a freezer in Paris, I think in 1951 or sometime. So the princess of Caliph, she rings to Shaukat Ali, and now by this time Shaukat Ali, actually the country got divided, and he is now the Prime Minister of Pakistan. It is written very clearly that I spoke with my friend Shaukat Ali. It means that the Nizam state still at that point of time is maintaining a strong bond with somebody who supported formation of Pakistan, and by the time a war also happened, but still they are called best friends. And he writes a letter to the Prince of Saudi Arabia saying that the Caliph should be given due respects, and his grave was made besides the mosque in Medina. So we can see that these are all, if we see the in between, if we read in between the lines and incidents that are happening, and if we correlate, this is not a small nexus. It's a very big, a big sort of spider web, that these connections are intact between people and they are still flourishing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you can see whatever happens, and even during other wars, there are rumored to be trying. So, in fact, towards the end of the book, there is a very, Sitaram Goel ji describes what is going to happen when the next India-Pakistan war happens. That is catastrophic. What he says is that, look, they may have lost 3 wars, whatever, doesn't matter. The next time when it happens, do you think these people will support the Indian army, or do you think they will create chaos and they will actually make sure that the Indian army cannot fight the way it wants? And you can very clearly see this happening. I mean, Kashmir is of course one thing, but you go to Assam, go to Bengal, and you can very clearly see that the local population there is creating hurdles for the Indian army. So if the full-scale war breaks out in those cases, chicken snake and all the other things, I mean, it's just very clear what is going to happen. So
I
yes.
personally feel, in case when you talked of the chicken neck, see, we know that there is a chicken neck over here that disconnects Northeast India from the rest of India. But if we have a strong presence with some equipment in Northeast India, even if that chicken neck is broken for a while, till the reconnection happens with the rest of India, the Northeast Indian region can still function well by itself. I mean, we have to stop worrying about how they'll get disconnected. Their resources are there with them. They have their fuel, they have their water, they grow their food. As long as you equip them with enough military equipment and, some personnel and some armed regiments are kept there, it should actually work out. I mean, we need not be that worried. We don't want it to happen, of course.
Yes. That's the point. It's not about being worried. It's just that basically the point here is that the internal enemies are more problematic and stronger than the external enemies, and we should open our eyes to them. That's the point.
Yes.
So during during the anti-British revolution that happened in Turkey in support of the Khalifa at that time, 13,000 Indian Muslims went from India to Turkey to fight against the British there. Armed revolution. It's exactly the same way people from Kerala go to ISIS to fight for a Khalifa. So it's the same caliphate principle that's been going on since that point in time. And Maulana Azad, who was a very tall Muslim leader of the Congress at that point in time, he persuaded Indians to sell whatever they have, gold, land, everything, and then but then donate that money to the cause of Khalifa at that point in time. So his heart was.
And the unfortunate thing is, he was made the first education minister.
Oh, it was not unfortunate. It was by design. I mean, of course, unfortunate for us.
Yeah, it was by design. Yeah,
it's by design. I mean,
and apparently, he never had a formal education. He was only educated in the madrasa.
No, that was his qualification. Lakshmi ji.
That was his qualification.
That was
And
his eventual
It was
destination
by
for all Indian
design. It was
students.
by design. And remember, I mean, only the couple of days back, we are talking about this 1 year of NEP and all those things. We require NEP to function so well because of this. And yeah, so so right.
No, because these are not new problems, and the surprising thing is, if we read the 6th chapter and 5th chapter, what Sitaram Goelji has written few, I mean, at least a couple of decades back, are still very much prevalent today,
Absolutely.
and in a much more bigger fashion. And there's a saying in my mother tongue that if somebody is a thief inside your house, even God cannot find him.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I think the capture of the minds of the minority, especially the Muslim minority, is total. Because if you talk to any of your Muslim friends or acquaintances, if you talk about Pakistan, they would say, "Okay, I support India. You know, Pakistan is our enemy, and so and so." But if someone knows a little bit of history and you try to strike a conversation with them on Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who was the one who overthrew the Khilafat, then they'll unequivocally everyone will say that, okay, Ataturk is an idiot and we don't support him.
Yeah. Because
so I mean they can I mean because they live in India, it's fine for them to say, okay, we don't like Pakistan or we hate Pakistan. But when it comes to Khilafat, the Caliphate, they're pretty much very clear about what their stance is.
I think we should have some discussion around the Mopla rights also, because
yes. I mean the
Khilafat movement immediate effect was Mopla rights, because direct action day and all are much more later. But Mopla rights
are three centenaries. There are three centenaries. One is the centenary of the Mopla right, 1921 to 2021. And close on heels, I was reading a Swaraj article recently about how the Communist Party of China is also holding some centenary celebrations. I think the Communist Party of India is probably round to complete a centenary, and is the RSS.
No. So the Communist Party of India, Sitaram Yechury and all of them attended that, and they're very happy.
Yeah,
so it must have just got concluded, and the RSS is approaching its centenary.
Or day before yesterday, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so the Mopla centenary must be this year, right? 2021.
It is this year. It is this year. I don't know which month all this took place. Any idea which month it was in 1920?
I think it was
season.
I think Sharad
Monsoon.
Whatever. I mean, I'm not.
Sharad Rutu.
Just checking.
But good point. When I don't know that. I don't remember the dates.
No. The only thing is, if we were to ever do something with lockdown going on, and if we haven't done anything, though no one is
August 20.
We have got time. Okay, so we are at 3 weeks
August
away.
20.
3 weeks away.
Yeah.
So we can have a special session on Mopla actually.
Yes. And
after the Mopla riots, Congress sent multiple delegations to Kerala to do a ground study. And this happened after the Multan riots also in 1921. Both the reports are very interesting because if you read them, you'll feel that some RSS guy has written that report. Because even the Congress people felt that the Muslims were ruthless when it comes to when they're religiously aroused and when they start rioting.
Where is Kohat? Is it Northwest Frontier Province? Kohat. Because there was a Muslim leader, I don't know which of these, he was having a discussion with Veer Savarkar, and he had opposed Veer Savarkar's idea of Shuddhi. Okay, and Kohat was where there were riots, but that was much later when Veer Savarkar was freed of all his bondage of not participating in political life or something. But Kohat had a history of riots, and I think that is not too far from Multan. I mean, we can search on Google. There is also an interesting encounter of Veer Savarkar with one of these Muslim sounding names. I don't know, Ali Brothers or who it was. He met him at the Santa Cruz airport, at the Santa Cruz airport of Mumbai. Okay. And at that air terminal, one of them was entering the airport, one of them was leaving the airport, and they happened to meet each other right at the door. And then Veer Savarkar was not a very tall person by height. But this person, the Muslim side, was a very, very tall gentleman. and he looked down on Savarkar, scorned at him and said, "तो आप तो मराठे height के हैं." Okay, so Veer Savarkar took a moment, paused, and then he said, "I see ही एक मुलाकात हुई थी प्रतापगढ़ पर जब अफजल खान को शिवाजी मिले थे."
That was nice.
Yes. So
So
anyway,
yeah. No. So I was saying. So Congress sent one fact-finding delegation under the leadership of Madan Mohan Malviya to Multan after the 1921 riots, and the report clearly states that abducting Hindu girls, converting them, and getting them married to Muslim gentlemen was quite rampant even in that day. So this is a Congress report.
Love jihad.
Yeah, love jihad, exactly. 1921.
It was not love, it was just.
This is rape jihad. Rape jihad.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is one book on, I don't know, I think, so there is one book from Trasadasyu from Kerala itself by Tirur Dinesh, completely on Mopla rights. He did 30 years of research, meeting all the people, I mean the family members whose ancestors underwent this turmoil, and he compiled all the things with fact finding and everything. So the title itself is Mopla Rights by Tirur Dinesh. So it's a very good book, and in a very pinpointed way, he has written in a very detailed fashion what happened and all those things. He did not mince words.
I request you to type down the name of the book in the chat box so that everybody can
see a detailed history of these places, these incidents, whether it is this book by this gentleman or whether it is the fact-finding reports of Congress. What we have to understand is there is a juxtapositioning of this happening of the Mopla riots when it comes to the further plan for the partition of India and to create Pakistan. This was like their pilot attempt. What happens if you try to kill Hindus? What happens if you try to take their women? What happens if you heap atrocities on them? Do they cover down? Are there repercussions in the rest of the country? And this was, where they had already got all equipped for the Khilafat agitation. So they had their wherewithal, they had their resources, but they put it into action. And this was a full 26 years before actual partition, 25 years before the direct action riots. So this all has its repercussions. See, partition did not happen there in 1947. Partition took place in the east and west, not in the south. So that still remains a pan-Indian Muslim consciousness. It remains a pan-ulema consciousness. It remains a matter of, they conducted a pilot trial and they were successful, and then they applied that model in other parts of the country. And we have to see that perspective, because going into the details of how it was planned out also is actually a template of how it would be carried out, and how it was carried out there would also have its inspiration on how Mecca was captured, the strategies involved first for the capture of Medina, then for Mecca, all those different wars, and how there was support garnered for the next invasion after one invasion was successful or defeated. So this is how they have created their training in their mind through madrasa education. They implemented it here, and when they found that it worked, they implemented it in the rest of the country. And India diabolically had two things.
Experiment they did it in Delhi also. In Delhi also they did the same thing.
Which year?
Delhi riots.
Same Khilafat time.
And the template that they used, in during Khilafat time, they implemented similar template during the recent Delhi riots also.
Yes. 2020 time. Yes.
Yeah, in the modern days also they use the same thing.
Yes. So it's a tried and tested model for them. So India suffered two diabolical things one after another. The first is post 1857, there was massive disarmament of communities of India with a selective support for only a few who were treated as the martial races, see the Sikhs and others. So others were disarmed. It became illegal in British times to practice arms and to use arms. A lot of our martial arts were practiced without the British coming to know. If you were a practitioner of Silamban in Tamil Nadu, even in Sri Lanka, Angampura, whether it comes to Shastra Vidya of Punjab, all these places had to, even the Maithai art, Manipur art of Thangta. So all of these were practiced clandestinely to keep the tradition going. This was all part of that phase of disarmament. And then came the phase of non-violence preaching. So this was quick on that. And in the middle of these two phases, where the first phase had not ended and the second phase of the preaching of non-violence had begun, what got waylaid is the armed revolutionary movement, and it coincided with Savarkar's years in Andaman.
Okay.
And it coincided with the abdication of certain revolutionaries by them going into the communist and socialist mold. And it also coincided with the Anushilan Samiti losing steam and Aurobindo coming into French territory, because it was French territory, Pondicherry, it was not British territory. And a lot of shifting of gears happened in this time. See, we have to know, I'm a supporter of Tilak, but I think the Lucknow Pact predates Gandhi. So concessions have been made by people across decades in the pre-partition times. If you take the 20th century, concessions have been made. We have to move our viewpoint from just incidents, specific incidents like great direct action of this time or Mapla riots of Kerala of that time, to having an overview. This overview tells us that they prepared themselves, and we were in a phase of disarmament followed by non-violence.
More than disarmament,
so Tilak was called.
Sorry.
No, so Tilak was called extremist by the Congress because he asked
Yes.
for Purna Swaraj, not because
Yes.
he called people to arms. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
how.
No, that is what I'm saying. See, more than disarmament, I think it's our brain fade, right? What is the modern day called brain fade? We just not into that space that we have to fight for things. We just it is ostrich syndrome. We just shut down our eyes. Even when
it's punished. You're punished if you keep arms. You're punished if you use those arms.
This is a strange thing. See, this is a strange thing. I'll tell you. See, the Bengal riots in the recent years, this happened in the hills of, I mean, it's very close to Kolkata. It has happened in Howrah. So it is 10-15 kilometers from the Kolkata border. People there, I mean, I personally know somebody who had suffered, and yet, people are just saying these are one-off incidents. This is not going to happen. Or this just happened. This is not going to happen. This has been happening again and again and again. In Uttar Pradesh, this happened. Kamlesh Tiwari got murdered in broad daylight. In West Bengal, these things happened, and yet we are just behaving.
Kamlesh Tiwari getting murdered is actually a blot on Yogi's track record, whatever you may say. I mean, why could he allow it to happen?
See, murder is fine. It's not the murder that is the problem. It's that what happens after the thing. So so the blot is not because somebody got murdered, but the blot is when nothing happens to the murderers, or there is no statewide condemnation or breaking down or these kind of things. So on that account, the Lucknow riots, what was done after the Lucknow riots, passing an ordinance going against Allahabad High Court to post their pictures and get money out of them, that was a very good move.
That was a very good move, yes.
So we have to be assertive, we have to be strong, and
we have to be assertive.
Yeah.
And if we see the chapters of the Heroic Hindu Resistance book, from the concerted action of Hindu kings against Qasim, till the time everything became decentralized in resistance at the time of later invaders, we see the same thing. Jammu is fighting its battles alone. Bengal is fighting its battles alone. And Kerala is fighting its battles alone. Some social media cohesion is indeed there, but it has not fructified into some kind of a political strategy at an all India level. It's still like Ram Bharose, it's Modi Bharose. So it's still not where we have learned.
It's not even that. It's a denial. It's a denial through our education. It's a denial that is harming us. See, when it comes to things, we can get united. If you want to get united, the point is our education system, our everything just forces us to be denying these things. So that is a problem.
It's true. So,
and that NEP with its history distortion, suggestion, outreach by the government is 7 years after Modi first came to power. 7 years.
NEP,
and what will it fructify into? That's still a question.
Nobody knows. So there's a parliamentary committee on this, right? There's a parliamentary committee that must include Congress, that must include left members, that must include this, that, DMK, all of
That
this.
is what is a parliamentary committee. That is the
Why
meaning of
a
a
parliamentary
parliamentary.
committee? There things are clear.
Exactly.
NCERT, you read that book that Vamsiji so nicely pointed out, the book by Neeraj Attri. It clearly pointed out NCERT has got no locus standi. It has cited nothing for all that it's changed. Why does it need to go through all this charade to change it or not change it? Why? I mean, it's just mind-boggling. To change a line, you have to go 2 years of parliamentary committee, appease everybody, get Congress's sign, and then change it. Why run a government? Just hand it over to them then. So,
and this is also that we are supposed to strategically and tactically remain quiet till a Rajya Sabha majority is achieved. This is what all the votes of forwards are eventually about.
There is a famous point that I think who made, I am forgetting the name, some Greek person made. So when Greece was run over by, I think, Romans or somebody, he said, look, you can get victory, but you do not know how to use victory. This is the point. We can get
so
victory.
Somebody has said the BJP is in office, it's not in power.
Yes, we can get Bangladesh victory, we can get military victories, we can also probably get, if you believe in this BJP ideology, we can get electoral victories, but we do not know how to use our victories. So those victories are useless, because one day or the other you will lose. You cannot keep on winning all your life. That's so rightly pointed out by Kiranji last week, saying that you have this fort mentality, right? You defend thrice, you defend 30 times. 31st time you will lose, and that's it, because you have not utilized those 30 times at all. You have gone in, I mean, you have these committees, whatever.
Talking of repeated attempts, when it came to Constantinople, which later became Istanbul, everyone knows how long it took for the Muslim side to finally go past that fortress. Constantinople was considered indefatigable, but it got defeated, and it was the process of trying to attack Constantinople took so many centuries, but they still did it. That's why they have said, even if it takes us 500 years, we'll pull down the Ram Mandir again.
Yeah. This point was also actually mentioned in Sitaram Goelji's book, that we ignore the internal forces, somewhere we are going to pay the price again.
Yeah, we are paying the price. We are paying the price. Go to border districts of Bengal. It is not India any further. This is just not India. It's on pen and paper there, India. That's all. No room.
Adding to your point, I mean, even Aditya's point that when a person is made mentally weak, and then we make him physically weak, it's very easy to conquer them. It's not just with the Muslim ideology, or even if you see the underplay of not the underplay, but the way even missionaries work during Rajshekhar Reddy's time, people were given 2 rupee per kg rice. Liquor was free flowing. So majority of the people were mentally weak. That is when he let loose all these missionary people in the border areas and all those in villages. So the person is well fed. He doesn't have to work for his daily needs. And then at throwaway prices, you have liquor for him. Then these people were rampant, and a lot of conversion happened.
So the current Mizoram-Assam dispute is also linked to this.
Yes. See, there are Brur-Yangs there. I have visited the Silchar Kachar area in 1998. That part has traditionally been with a lot of Bangla population. And it is where you have all the other states around. I mean, you can come there from Meghalaya, you can go into Tripura, you can approach Bangladesh, you can go into Mizoram, you can go into Manipur, you can go into Nagaland, and therefore there are lots of interstate disputes over there. And the Bharadwaj Speaks Twitter account has pointed out a lot of things, but there is an archaeological site there called Wangchia, which has shown that it has got nothing to do with the modern Christian culture here. In no ways it is very old, and it shows a polytheistic culture with animism, and it reminds one of Hinduism. So that is how. And if that is, I see a lot of the separatist movements in the Northeast, who were also militant movements, had their own websites. And I remember reading things from 20 years ago when the internet was very expensive, that they said in their websites that we are a Mongoloid race. And at that time, I think it was Vajpayee as the Prime Minister and K.R. Narayanan was the president. This was before Abdul Kalam Sahab. So at that time, the website actually pointed out, say Vajpayee's face is an Aryan face. K.R. Narayanan is a Dravidian face. And we are neither Aryan nor Dravidian, we are Mongoloid. So we are not India. India is these plus these, and we are not these, so we are not India, and therefore we have the right to secede. And we should become a separate nation. And if this is what they said, a lot of these tribes also claim that their entry into their current habitat is not very ancient. Okay, so we know the Dimasas are very ancient over there as Kiratos. But the Lushai Mizo people themselves claim that they're only 200 years old and that they came from China and then Burma. Okay, so they who came in 150 to 200 years want to be called indigenous people. And the Assamese Kalita, the Assamese Brahman, the Bengali people who have been living there, these should not be considered, the Vishnupriya Manipuri, these should not be considered indigenous, even though they have a history of being there for thousands of years. They are not indigenous, but these people, because they are a tribe, should be considered indigenous when their own statement is that they came in here 150 to 200 years ago.
Right. So it's an interesting fact that the word Adivasi was actually introduced by Christian missionaries. It
was a direct translation of Aboriginal.
No, it was yes. I mean, translation of course, but this word you will never find in any Indian literature before the Christian missionaries introduced it.
Yes, so it is a Sanskritized translation of something which is very Abrahamic in its, or colonial rather, in its construct, right, or etymology rather.
Right.
We have a word called Vanavasi, but not Adivasi.
No,
in fact, Janajati sounds better.
Yeah. So the Adi is because they want to say that this is the original and this India.
And someone else came as an Aryan invader.
Aryan face and Dravidian.
Mool Nivasi, yes.
We have Vanavasi and Vanacharis also, but I believe even Mool Nivasi is a colonial word.
Yeah, that's also a colonial word.
Yeah. It directly comes from the Aryan invasion theory, right? So
yes, exactly. And this is being invoked across Maharashtra, you know, when it comes to Brahmin hatred. The BI edition of Maharashtra, Breaking India.
Because we are talking about terminology, I noticed, and like when I was writing the script for this speech, we normally by default I wrote something like Voice of India Academy is taking up a Herculean task. Then when I reread that again, I thought, why should I say it as Herculean task? I just changed it as this is a Bhagirath Prayatna. So we have equivalent terms. So we should say that, okay, and then we should also we can say that this is a Bible for so and so technology. We can say that this is a Gita for so and so technology.
Yes.
I say Himalayan task whenever.
Himalayan task. Ganges came from Himalaya only. Yeah.
But you see, Lakshmiji, the very nice play of words. When it comes to blunder, then it's an Himalayan blunder. But when it's a task, it's a Bible or whatever. This Herculean.
It is like saying there is no Chinese virus, but there is an Indian variant.
Exactly. So the original virus cannot be called Chinese. So this is all the NEP technology. I mean, this is, by the way, this is all the NCERT technology. So this is the exact same methodology that they use. And it grows into your subconscious mind. I mean, Vamsiji, what he's pointing out is that unless he's extra careful and reread, the first thing that comes to even a person like Vamsiji is about Herculean task. So you see how much it is ingrained through our system.
See, we have a lot of Christian imagery. I keep my fingers crossed because this is how Christians pray. I carry that burden on my chest because Jesus had carried the cross to that Golgotha Parbat. Okay, and there are more such things. I don't know whether touchwood is something Christian or pagan, I don't know, but it is definitely a colonial word. But these words, you know, I carry that burden on my chest. I keep my fingers crossed, and there will be many more such words. It's excruciating pain. You know, words like excruciating pain.
Even saying bless you after someone sneezes is a
sneezes. Yes.
It's a
Yeah,
Christian
then
concept.
any good
Rest
activist
in
is called a
peace.
crusader.
No, no,
Sorry?
rest in
Any
peace.
good activist is called a crusader.
Rest in peace. No, what people are doing is because rest in peace is English. Sorry, bless you after someone sneezes is English. They are saying Chiranjeeva as if it came from Ramayana. It's not. It is still biblical.
Yes.
Maybe we can come up with a compendium of all these alternative terminology. Slowly we have to push it so that we start using it, then people hear and then they use it.
Vamsiji, now that you mention it, I think there is a nice book of Sanskrit, these kind of things, phrases that you can use. I have to find the book and tell the name. There is this very nice
Also,
thing.
Yeah, there's this guy called Nityanand Mishra. He resides in Bombay.
Sanskrit. Yes.
Yeah, he writes. He wrote books on Sunamas, which are like Sanskrit names. Because a lot of times when you search for Sanskrit names, the internet throws you some Persian name or Turkish name disguised as a Sanskrit name, right? So he intended to correct that, and he brought out some couple of volumes of actual Sanskrit names, and he's quite good at finding the original Indian words or Sanskrit words for a lot of modern. The bigger problem is, okay, English is one thing, but how about Hindi? You can't speak Hindi without use of Arabic and Persian words, right?
No, it sounds
Kursi,
very bookish.
even kursi.
Actually.
Yeah, kursi, kitab are all Arabic words. We don't even understand that. Kursi
We
is
say kurchi
Arabic.
in Marathi.
Even that is Arabic.
Yes.
We say kurchi in Telugu also. That's Arabic.
The thing is, amongst the northern Indian block of languages which are treated as the Indo-Aryan, I find that the language which is the least Arabicized, the least Persianized, and the least Islamized is actually Odia.
Okay.
Odia, because I have an Odia employee who's talking on the phone all the time. I do speak elementary Bangla, but even Bangla has a few more Urdu words than Odia does. So Odia actually, yeah.
No, our Bangla surnames are Persian surnames. Mazumdar.
Oh, we have Mazumdar in Marathi people too.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
These are
the word
surnames.
Peshwa is a Persian name.
These are titles.
No, these are not titles.
Parties.
Yes, these are titles.
No, but they became surnames, right? These days they have become surnames.
Yeah, they are used as, absolutely. You are right. They were absolutely being used as titles, and therefore even this Chaudhuri, the thing, right? This Chaudhuri is such a common thing.
Yes, it's
Chaudhuri,
a Persian name.
Roy, and all those things. These are the Rai Bahadur thing, and then there's a lot of colonial baggage, Islam baggage, colonial baggage. Well, we are only feeling the Christian baggage now. So,
see, there are some things, I have stumbled upon a few words which actually are found in English as a language, and I do not know if they are present in other languages, but which seem to have a connection with Urdu, and you may point out the reason for it. I discussed this with Dr. Coenrad. It's put it up as a Facebook post. For instance, the Stinton's Comics has Captain Haddock saying 10,000 thundering typhoons. So typhoon or hurricane is similar to tufan. Okay, the word taboo is similar to toba. Okay, Plato and Aflatun, Aflatun on Platonic, Plato are actually the same. And there seems to be more of this, it's like, I'll give you one or two. Lub. Lub is lip, and lubs is a word. Okay, and you have badan and body. Okay,
no,
you have
English that way
sanguine
is quite
and sanguine. Yeah,
yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
No, English is quite open. At least they say that these are from Arabic and Persian, and there are so many Telugu and Marathi and Hindi words in English as well. For example, bandicoot is a Telugu word. Bandicoot is pandikoku basically. It's a big rat. So you will find so many attic, right? Ataka. So so at least they're transparent that way. But the problem is when our BJP and RSS leaders speak, they think they speak chaste Hindi. बीच में एक जबरदस्त आ जाता है, बीच में you find Persian words.
And we have a lot of this in our Marathi history. If you want to search out the history at the time of Chhatrapati Shivaji, there is so much of Persian In fact, there are students of Maratha history who now need to study more of Persian so that they understand the words which are there. They may be written in the Modi script. Also, the Modi script reminds me, I had met one Colonel Murthy who was from Rajamahendravaram and Telugu. Now, he was very senior. I do not know if he is still there. I have lost touch with him. He said his point of research 25 years ago was about the closeness between Marathi, Telugu and Kannada cultures as one sub-civilization centered on the two rivers, Godavari and Krishna. And the other thing is said is, this is what people here who speak Telugu and Kannada can tell me about. He said the Modi script, which was like a running Devanagari script, okay, was actually a script which was also used by Telugu and Kannada people.
No, so I'm not very aware of Modi script, but especially Telugu, Kannada, and Marathi, Maharashtra, they're quite very well intertwined historically.
Yes.
Probably until the Muslim invasion came and maybe separated it. I don't know.
Colonel Murthy said the separation of the togetherness started not because of linguistics and the Aryan invasion divide, but by the burning of Modi manuscripts by the British.
Possible. See, I'll tell you, the guy who designed our national flag, Pingali Venkaya, the Pingali is a word coming from Maharashtra. It's Pingle, basically.
Yes, yes.
So when their family moved and settled in Godavari area of Andhra, it became Pingali.
Yes.
So there's so many connections. I mean, in fact, I was talking to Nityanand Mishra the other day about a word called Bahattar. Bahattar is a word which is used in pre-Islamic Telugu inscriptions, and I thought this is a Persian word, and I was wondering how a Persian word made it to Telugu before Muslims came. Then he referred to some ancient Shabdakoshas and all that, Amarakoshas, and he told me that it's a Maharashtrian Prakrit word.
Yes,
it's not Persian. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, Marathwada of Maharashtra, which then was part of Usmanistan, Nizam state. So Marathwada is considered to be classical Maharashtra. Vidarbha and Marathwada are classical Maharashtra. My Konkan is a very more recent development. It has some very ancient temples, no doubt. There have been pockets of human inhabitation, but it was all Western Ghats forests. And Marathwada has been, the Godavari is the absolute center of everything.
Yeah.
When it talk of this,
by the way, before I hand it over to Arnabji, so basically the Shatavahana Empire, which basically covered Godavari from its start to end.
Yes.
It basically is a mix of Telugu and Maharashtra cultures. So
and some Kannada too, because the
little bit of Kannada,
river comes down from there. I forgot the name of the Mansra river. I think that comes from northeastern Karnataka, around Bidar and all those places. Bidar is a place wherever you have tri-borders of 3 states, you have a lot of osmosis. It's the same Godavari basin.
Yeah. Right. Back to Arnabji. Yeah.
Yeah. So So I just wanted to. Its time is running out as usual. I have to play that role. So just wanted to thank all the participants, all the presenters. We had a very, very nice series of talks by all the presenters. So this book, Heroic Hindu Resistance, there were 6 chapters, and we had this over 7 weeks. So I thank the Kalyan Sundaram Venkatachalam, who did the first chapter, then Abhijit Bhattacharya, 2nd chapter, then Lakshmi Prasad ji himself did the 3rd chapter, 4th chapter was done by Sudhanshu Singh, 5th chapter Kiran Pategarji, and the 6th chapter today by V. Vamsi Krishna. So I thank all of all the speakers, everybody. So we are wrapping this up, this module, this series of this thing, this book is finished. So as part of the Voice of India Academy, we are meeting every Saturday, right? So it may not be a formal event as announced through Eventbrite and registration and all of this, but we do meet every Saturday, 7:30 p.m. So if there is, I'm hoping you are all interested in this, and so please join us for our weekly addas, what we call in Bangla as adda, so weekly sessions. And later on, we will also take up some more books. So we have certain things in the pipeline, in the plan. So we plan to take up this issue of Malerkotla, the
Yes.
Malerkotla. Yes, so we will take this up. Mopla rebellion is another important thing. This is the 100 years, so we must know more about it, and probably we will take it up. Then we also plan to cover some other books of Sitaram Goelji, probably in the upcoming thing. So, if I mean, so my earnest request to all of you is, please keep attending this. Please join the Voice of India Academy WhatsApp group, Telegram group, and please, once we decide on the next book, please volunteer for this. For presentation, like we had 6 excellent presentations, actually 7 presentations Abhijit did twice, so but it was a very nice start. So yeah, so that's so my sincere thanks to all of them. I have been doing this moderating role, not doing anything actually. All of them.
One thing to say to all of you, I'm part of some other circles, and there is a Kashmiri gentleman with whom I'm interacting. We may be having something happening related to the Sindhu River and the Saraswati River, and I may be one of the persons talking on the 14th of August, which may also be a Saturday, and it may coincide with this time. So I'm not sure about the 14th of August. If there is a link, I will share it with you all, because it's not yet out. So that's.
I will be delighted to participate and listen.
Yes, because there is something about one academy tying up under the Ministry of Culture. I'm not aware about the further details. It's very recent. So in fact, I have to prepare for that. Is there anything planned for the very next Saturday?
So the very next Saturday, we is an open session. We will just meet and have, as I said, just a chat session. Anything and
could I then try to make it my pilot presentation with you all on what I was asked to speak the further Saturday after that?
Probably
so that it is.
We can discuss this with you later on. I mean,
yeah, so I can improve on it with the Sunday the next day before the actual day of 14th, because the Ministry of Culture was involved in the managing of this.
Actually, the idea is that we don't repeat speakers as far as possible. So we have to keep getting new people to present.
So yeah, Aditya, I think if you want to have a pilot session, I think that should be fine. But yeah, if you can give us the time of the presentation, how much duration it's going to be.
I think 7:30 is good.
And the duration, how long will it take?
1 hour.
Okay.
So we'll
yeah, maybe we can, when we meet next week, we can probably discuss on that.
Yeah, we can. We'll let you know. So let's. But again, I as Kiranji has already said, we want new speakers. So one of the aims of this academy, of course, we are an unofficial body. One of the aims of this academy is to not be this ostrich, right? So we should be knowing the facts. We should be discussing this openly, and I mean, and we should be. So the more new speakers are coming in, at least I got this anecdotal evidence from Abhijit. Abhijit was thanking me very heavily because he had not read the book, but because he agreed to be the speaker, now he has read the book and he has got very interested into this, right? So, I mean, if nothing, then this deadline, we are all in this modern world, right? This deadline of presentation will make you read a book at least by Sitaram, or at least a chapter. So, and we all get to know this, right? Rather than all of us reading this book, if somebody presents, then this is we all get to know, and this is very nice.
Absolutely. No, I see it as a somewhat similar to the parayans that we do for Ramayana and Mahabharata, right?
Yes.
It's a satsang.
Satsang. Absolutely. Yes. Satsang. Yes. So and we have this. We have been, I mean, uploading all the sessions. All the even this session is getting recorded, so we will be uploading all of this in the YouTube. So, if permitting time and interest, please do visit that. And, yes.
Yeah, so I think keep watching the WhatsApp and Telegram space. We'll probably update the future plans there. Next week probably we'll just meet as Arnab said, just like an adda, just to do some brainstorming. But maybe from the week afterwards, we'll come up with a new plan, and we should definitely plan for Mopla centenary, because I don't know what's the narrative is going to be in the popular media channels about Mopla rights, but we should have our own narrative, the real narrative.
Yes.
All right, thanks a lot.
At least before
you.
the 20th of August.
Absolutely.
Yes, so we can actually have it on 21st of August. Oh, we'll see the deadlines. But yeah, any more comments from anybody, please?
So Vamshi garu,
Please, Kiran.
Bale baga chade undar. Thank you.
ధన్యవాదములు.
I honestly feel we should have something on the secret geography of Bharata's journey from Koshala Raja to Kekaya Raja and back, which Vamsi ji had talked about from the Ramayana. And that is a wonderful aspect of the Ramayana which we have not explored. Could we have some session on that, please?
We can definitely. So there is this WhatsApp group that is actually, I find it quite interesting. There's lots of these things, lots of this discussions going on without forwards. So it's very important that we have this forward free. It's only our own thoughts. Of course, I mean, to link, to cite something, you can have this citation, but not blind. And we can definitely take it up. So Ramayana has lots of interesting things. This geography, even Shugriv's Atlas, what Nilesh Oak calls Shugriv's Atlas, that's also extremely interesting. So and Nilesh Oak's timings, even that are fascinating.
So next time is Aditya making a presentation next time?
We'll see.
So I think when we meet next Saturday for a brainstorming, we can probably do that. Deliberate on that.
Okay.
Maybe we can have one agenda for brainstorming rather than picking up random topics. We can think of
we will.
high level topics.
We will.
Exactly. So we'll probably use WhatsApp to communicate that, and then we can.
So anybody
so that we come prepared.
wants to join us, you know, any one of us, please ping us. I'll be happy to add you to the WhatsApp group. So anybody who has not yet joined. So
we have a bunch of participants still. If anyone wants to say anything about this entire effort, we have a few more minutes, maybe a couple of minutes. Any suggestions or any ideas or just feedback? I think feedback is something that we need to collect.
I think one of the things which probably we missed out today, because the heading is the nature of national frontiers, and in the intellectual frontiers, what Sitaramji says that one of the big mistakes that we made is not to counter intellectually the narrative of Islam. And this whole idea of Sarva Dharma Samabhava, which we are extending cordially to Islam and to Christianity, it actually it doesn't work. It only applies to dharmic paths. All the dharmic paths which are come out of India, like Jainism or Buddhism or things like that, or the various Vishishtadvaita, Advaita, like that. But if you see this that Moinuddin Chishti, the Sufi saint, many of the visitors are Indians. I mean, are Hindus. Sorry.
Yes.
So I mean, this is a confusion, and this is also one of the mental frontiers.
Even I did visit some dargahs. I go to Haji Ali when I was in Mumbai. So
So that is one point which we need to keep in mind.
And
we cannot extend that courtesy to non-dharmic religions.
Another point I would like to point out is there is too much of a co-identification of Vishishtadvaita with Vaishnavism, Dvaita with Vaishnavism. when actually there could be darshanas which are Vishishtadvaita Shaiva and Dvaita Shaiva also. I mean, what is Shaiva Siddhanta, what is Abhinana Shastra or Kashmir Shaivism? We have not studied those, and they are mentioned in Sarvadarshan Sangraha. So this would also be a good point because we understand ourselves in greater detail.
Right. So just to end on that note, see, there are so many topics that many people find interesting. So if you want to have, if you want to do some presentation, research, whatever, thinking, leading a discussion, so this Voice of India Academy, we will be very, very happy to do that. So please do come up with topics, please do come up with, I mean, leading the discussion through presentations or whatever. So any such thing, because it's not possible for everybody to read everything. So we must take up topics and lead the discussion. So, and that way, that is the only way we can get enriched. So, all right, I guess it's 9 o'clock, right dot on the time. So it's time to finish. So thank you all.
Since Anaji, this is Pratik here. Since Lakshmi ji also mentioned about if anybody wants to say, just from people who are listeners, not the active participants. So actually, I had been a very keen listener, and I apologize that I have not been a participant. I am guilty of that. But one second, let me add my video also. But yeah, so I'm a very keen listener all the way, starting from Rajiv ji's original initiatives of Indology Academy, right? From Dr. Conrad's. So I'd be keen listener, and I am avid. This is very, I mean, with the vigor and passion that you guys have these discussions, it really gets me excited. It probes me to read more, and I honestly take notes on the things you've said and what Aditya ji mentions, what Kiran ji mentions, and Lakshmi ji, and everybody, all of you guys are very knowledgeable. So thank you so much for continuing this effort. I promise to be a part of this. And going forward, hopefully by fall, when I am well settled around and I have more time, I would aspire to contribute also actively. So like I was mentioning earlier, I am an avid reader also. I have a lot of books that I read. Audible is my best friend when nobody's around, when my family is not around, and I read a lot of books through Audible, and I make notes for the chapters that I like. So I would probably like to share some of these things. I have read Sanjeev Sanyal ji's book also, books. You obviously would have known him. A lot of other books. I plan to share some of those readings also going forward. But thank you for keeping the momentum right from those times of Indology Academy to this Voice of India Academy. This has been a very interesting discussion. So it's a very charged up. Personally, to me, it's very charged up discussion. So it's like if we are not doing this, and more people don't come together to be at least be aware and make other people aware, it'll be hard and for the future generations to come forward and know, as you mentioned, right? It's most people are ignorant and need to be shrugged that, hey, wake up, this is what is happening. If you think everything is just going fine and chalta attitude is not going to do well to you. So thank you so much for all your efforts. I personally appreciate it. There was just we'll take one more minute. There was one other instance. I don't know if Kiranji or Adityaji somewhere they mentioned in one of the lectures that there is a call for even if we can support Voice of India Academy financially also. So I do not know the channels, but at least the least I can do right now, because of the lack of time, at least I can try and financially support the efforts. So if there is some such channel, please let me know offline also, and please do add me to the WhatsApp group. I will connect with you, Arnab ji, offline.
Oh, please do. You are in the WhatsApp group?
I am not yet. No, I am. Yeah. So, but
That's great feedback, Pratik ji, and thanks for all your support. But I think I can see Kiranji nodding his head horizontally when you said asking for financial support, because I don't think we made a plea for donations. And as you can see, this effort takes nothing. We are all on a Zoom call. We are just sharing our thoughts. So at the moment, there is no financial support required.
Agreed,
Yeah.
100% agreed. But I think there was one such mentions where if you
About
can
the
at
books.
least try exactly, yes, about the books. If you
We mentioned that a donor has come forward, and we are in a position to donate about 12 sets of books. And at the moment, we are just starting. So, there's a long way to go. So that is not, financial contribution is not on top of our priorities at the moment.
Totally, yes.
So,
and with the discussions that I am
at this
seeing,
point in time, we may have it later on whenever, but as of now, we are. But we'll keep you in mind. So whenever, because finance is something that we cannot ignore in the long run.
Yeah.
But it will be really great, and whenever you get settled down, I mean, if you can start sharing your knowledge from the books that you've read, we can probably organize similar sessions, and I'm pretty sure it will be enlightening for all of us.
Right.
I feel shy and embarrassed with the immense knowledge that you bring to the table. I would be able to contribute.
No.
No. This is definitely not done. I mean, in the sense that please don't feel shy. As I said, it is not possible for everybody to read or know everything. It is okay. There are topics that I may have just read. I just may have happened to read a book more than you, and there will be so many other topics where you have read more than me. So it's okay. There's nothing. It's an open session.
Surely.
Right. So please, that is also another thing. If you can please spread the word that we are such an academy, and so it's an open discussion session. If people can join, and
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Sure. So looking forward to many such discussions, and thank you everybody again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for being candid and being open.
All right. So thank you all.
Good night.
So namaste. We will see you soon.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.